Well, good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar today. My name is Julie Thomas, and I'm pleased to introduce today a co-presenter that's going to be talking to you today, and his name is Rocky Lagrone. Rocky is the Director of Sales of Objective Management Group. Interestingly enough, Objective Management Group is a sales assessment partner that Value Selling has recently brought on. We actually use Objective Management Group to help us better select people to join our team, as they are the first assessment that was ever built by sales representatives for sales representatives, and has the highest level of validation in the marketplace for doing assessments that are predictive of performance for sales professionals. I will let you know that as we go through this today, we will be addressing questions, and today's session is also being recorded, and there are some resources that we'll be providing to you throughout the session. So if you have any questions, please chime in and we'll address them as we go through this. So without further ado, Rocky, thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you, Julie, and thank you everyone for taking a little bit of time out of your day to spend some time with us to talk about hiring sales superstars. Julie, it's been a pleasure working with you so far, and I know we've seen great results with your internal team, and certainly as a user and a developer with Objective Management Group, Director of Sales, we've seen these tools used in hundreds and thousands and really unbelievable types of success with these tools. Hiring salespeople seems to be one of the biggest challenges that companies face. It seems to ebb and flow. Today, the flow is candidates are pretty passive. The market has sucked up a lot of the great salespeople. Great salespeople aren't necessarily looking for a job. And salespeople are really good at interviewing when they are looking at a job, and sometimes better at interviewing than the people that are interviewing them. You know, they're great at first impressions. They're great at telling you what you want to hear. Companies struggle making the selection for sales. So today we're here to share some information with you that we've gathered over the years, some best practices through literally hiring thousands and thousands and thousands of salespeople. We'll talk a little bit about our tool. We'll talk about some of the 3 or 4 really key components for sales-specific hiring. We'll talk about the flaws of kind of what typically people do, and really do our best to give you the information that you can go and use this afternoon to change the way that you hire for your sales department and make sure you're hiring sales superstars. So the first question we have to ask is, if you knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that every salesperson that you hired would be wildly successful, how many would you hire in the next 12 months? So part of the challenge is we don't know, and many companies don't realize the cost or the investment that it takes to find, attract, interview, hire, and keep stronger salespeople, and then onboard them. And there's lost opportunity cost, there's training cost, there's cost for the ads, there's cost for your managers and your hiring managers to interview those people. There's cost sometimes involved with travel. So one of the first resources we'll introduce you to is called the Hiring Mistake Calculator. It's always a good idea to kind of know what you're up against. What we have found through the years is that a hiring mistake in the sales department typically equates to 3 times what you would pay that individual for the entire year. I would encourage you to go through that, look at it, spend some time with it, see where some of the flaws you might have in your hiring process and what that's costing you, because that's a huge drain on resources for the organization. Let's kind of talk about some statistics. We know through research and development and all the things we've been doing the last 35 years with just focused on sales hiring, sales assessments, and helping companies make better decisions to hire stronger people that not only can sell but actually will sell, is 90% of all hiring decisions are made from the interview. But when we really look at the accuracy of traditional interviewing, it's only 14% accurate, which tells us that most people's decisions about the interview are based on false information. That's evidenced as well by the fact of 30 million people have secured a job by lying on their resumes. We'll talk about resumes a little bit later. So with all these statistics, it's no wonder that sales hiring is a big challenge for organizations.
Rocky, I think that is a really interesting point that you just made. I was talking to a sales manager a few weeks ago, and he had 2 openings on his team that he was actively looking to fill. And we were talking about a bit of the process and some of these statistics. And the interesting thing is that manager had purchase authority for a physical good or service that did not exceed $2,500. Yet he was in the process of making decisions to extend offers to human capital assets, sales representatives to join his team. And that purchasing decision, if you will, to hire that individual, all up and in, was a 6-figure decision for the company. And he wasn't looking at it quite that way in terms of investing in an asset and human capital and making a purchase decision. He didn't equate hiring to purchasing. And it's an interesting analogy as you look at that of how hard that hiring or purchasing decision can be when it comes to hiring a person.
Yeah, great insight. And most people don't look at it that way either, Julie. So hopefully you were able to enlighten that sales manager and get them to recognize that human capital is the biggest investment any organization makes. When you look at the P&Ls, when you look at any kind of data, the majority of the funds that a company generates goes to labor, goes to personnel, goes to benefits, goes to supporting those personnel, and really creating the environment for those people that they hire to accelerate. So great insight and great reframe on that. What we believe is that hiring salespeople, the right salespeople, is really the first step for developing a dynamic sales force. If it's okay, I'm going to use a football analogy. If we took Tom Brady from the New England Patriots as the quarterback there, obviously won the Super Bowl. He's won more Super Bowls than anybody now. Certainly would be considered a superstar in that arena. And we took Tom away from his team with the New England Patriots, and we put him on the Cleveland Browns, who unfortunately have had a very poor run for the last 5 or 6 years and maybe more. Tom's presence on that team would elevate the entire team. It wouldn't be just the quarterback position that gets better, because a sales superstar will always bring others around. So many times it's difficult for companies to hire stronger salespeople because what they believe is stronger is not what is stronger. And when they see stronger, sometimes it's a little intimidating. So the sales superstars out there is what we're looking for, because they're a lot easier to help you grow your business with. And there are a lot of imposters. We find that salespeople typically come in 4 categories. And what you're really looking for is the person who not only can sell but actually will sell. Of course, that would be like a Michael Jordan, like a Tom Brady. Those guys are standouts. They're pretty easy to recognize, but sometimes they're hard to secure in your organization because they need lots of opportunity. And they typically outgrow jobs pretty fast. So one of the other things that we think companies need to know the answer to is how long will it take to get a 5 times return on investment of that salesperson, which we can help you figure out, and certainly part of our tool set. The other thing that companies need to know is who are the people that can sell but won't sell. And we'll talk a little bit about some other assessments in the marketplace that do a great job for what they were designed to do, but they tell you if someone can sell, but they don't tell you if they won't sell. The third, cannot sell but will sell. Many of you probably have seen the movie Rudy. Was not supposed to be able to play football, but made the team at Notre Dame. Was not supposed to be able to run the football, but scored a touchdown, a winning touchdown in a championship game. True story. Well, there are a lot of Rudys out there that companies are throwing away before they even get to the second interview part, because they're not really sure what they should be looking for. And the definition that we're going to give you of the ideal salesperson needs to be weighted to your company, to your systems, to your processes, to your style of leadership, to your management, to your accountability, to be able to sell your products and your services to your clients against the competition with your price points. And so it becomes pretty complex to some degree, but it can also be very simplified to determine not only can they sell, but will they sell. There are a lot of companies that make the mistake of hiring the people in category D, cannot sell, won't sell. Sometimes those are the people that look good, they sound good, they talk good, they interview well. We onboard them, we give them the hiring package, we take them through a couple weeks of training, we give them more time. They're close, their pipeline sounds good, their reports are looking better, but nothing ever closes. And 6 months into it, the company says, well, we just need to give them a little more time. And then they give them more time, and then they waste more money. And what they should have found out early on, before they even go through the second interview, is this someone that can sell and will sell, or is this someone that cannot sell and won't sell, or any of the other three categories that we don't want to hire? So salespeople kind of have their own way of doing things. Sales is a dysfunctional role, and I mean that in a nice way. But no other organization, no other department in an organization could or would put up with 70 to 80% negativity. Could you imagine your payroll department inside your organization being wrong 80% of the time? Could you imagine how much disruption that would be for business if you're and your employees and your colleagues got the wrong paycheck 80% of the time? It would be tremendous upset. But that's what we have to deal with in sales. Not only do they have to compete with your competition, but they have to compete with your internal resources. They have to compete for time with the sales manager. They have to compete against other salespeople. They have to compete for the best territories. They have to compete for the best leads. And so sales is a very different world. And for the most part, organizations tend to try to manage their sales departments just like they manage any other department. And there are so many different dynamics that take place in the sales department. You have to take that in consideration when you're looking at sales hiring as well. So one of the things that companies tend to do is use some type of third-party assessment. Of course, we have one, and we're going to introduce you to that today. But I think it makes sense just to pause for a minute and talk a little bit about the different types of assessments out there. They would typically fall into three buckets, if you will. One would be psychological or personality. The other would be behavioral, and the third might be aptitude. And everything could kind of fall into one or two of those categories that we have listed on the screen. The personality and psychology profiles, good stuff, great information. It's helpful to know about your new hires. It's helpful to know so that you can adapt and adjust your management style to that personality, to that person. It's good to know that, to learn how to adapt to your prospects and how salespeople might be doing that. But it's a very poor predictor for sales success, because what those assessments tell us is this individual can go out and make friends. This individual is good at relationship building. This individual has the capability to be outgoing, and they're charismatic. And that's all important, but making friends doesn't make sales. Otherwise, all of our clients, all of our friends would be clients, and that's just not the case. A behavioral assessment, again, good stuff. I don't disagree with any of those reports I've read or white papers or anything else. Those behavioral assessments are typically written by guys in white coats sitting in ivory towers who identify the top 5, the top 12, maybe the top 15, could be even the top 30 behaviors of successful people. And they take this behavioral model and put it into the sales world. Well, the problem with that is the behavioral model was defined and developed inside a social setting, not a sales setting. And so when the salesperson who matches with the behaviors that are identified of top performers goes out and fails because they don't execute when they're in front of the prospect, when they're under pressure, when they're under fire, when they're voice to voice, belt buckle to belt buckle, and the prospect throws them an objection that they're not used to. when they have too much empathy, for example, to be able to execute what their sales manager taught them or what an organization like Julie might have taught them, and value selling. The behavioral assessments, what they don't do is they don't tell you that the behaviors of your bottom performers are almost identical, if not exactly the same as your top performers, because they only come in and study the top performers. They don't look at the bottom performers. So we've got scientific evidence that can debunk every behavioral assessment out there that is borrowed into the selling world. Another assessment type might be aptitude. Aptitude tells us what we know. Let's suppose instead of spending time with us today for an hour, you spent time with Oprah Winfrey. What a great success story for her, right? From rags to riches. And she was teaching you everything there was to know about interviewing really important people, how to keep composure, how to take that interview and turn it into a TV show, and how to take the TV show and turn it into a magazine, and how to take the magazine and turn it into a network. We would learn a whole lot, and that would be great information. But just because we know it doesn't mean that we could go out tomorrow and start a TV show or start a network or start a magazine or any of the other things that she's been so successful at. So just because we know something doesn't mean we're going to execute it. Just because your sales candidates know your business doesn't mean they can execute in sales in that business. Just because they know your product mix, just because they know the questions, they know how to overcome the objections, they know the sales process, they know all the things that you need them to know, that doesn't mean they're going to execute when they are face-to-face or belt buckle to belt buckle or over the phone, whatever your sales process and sales style is. So all of those assessments are great for what they were designed for, but every one of those have been borrowed into sales. As Julie suggested, our assessment was built by sales experts for the sales business and the only assessment that's validated inside sales. So it's really important if you're going to use a tool, which we would highly recommend, because it gives you third-party information that you cannot find out any other way. Use one that's designed for the profession and for the business that you're in, that's customizable to your market, to your management, to your customers, to your competition, and so many other things that's customized to your particular way you sell. So let's kind of take a look at the traditional hiring process. And this is what's typically applied in the sales world, is the traditional approach, which is to advertise for the position, collect the resumes, review those resumes, interview maybe 1, 2, 3, 4 times, make someone an offer, and then hope and pray that they actually work out. And that's kind of a quick overview. Let's dive in a little bit deeper on that. The reason that hiring for sales results are so poor is because the traditional process doesn't work. If we think about the first step, we advertise the position. Well, most of the ads that we see that are written by, whether it's HR or the sales manager or somebody inside the organization, really describe the company and they describe the opportunity, and most of them all look and smell the same. What we would suggest is a very different process. We'll talk about that in a few minutes, but when you advertise what the company is and what the benefits of the company are and what the position is, it's not really attracting the right people. Next step in the traditional, well, here's a couple of ads. I got out of sync a little bit there. But let's look at, these ads. I'll give you a moment to read through those. Both are great examples. But I don't believe anyone on the phone today here in the call would apply to either one of those positions. It's just, could you imagine? Why would someone spend money on an ad that's written like these two? They're grossly negligent, and they're doing themselves and the sales business and the sales industry a disservice. So ads are one of the things that really cause challenges with the traditional process. Reading resumes. Resumes are typically bought and purchased through some application or some online program that somebody just puts their information into, or somebody's got a cousin or a sister or somebody in college and they type it up for them, or somebody, a professional resume writer, takes the candidate's experience and puts it on paper. And it's really nothing more than a third-party brochure about the candidate that wasn't typically even written by the candidate. Additionally, when you look at resumes, it's not what's on the resume that's important, it's what's missing from the resume that's important. You'll see things like top producer, President's Club award member, and then what we start to dig in and find out is, well, they were the top producer out of 3. Or maybe they were the top producer because they had the greatest territory and they didn't really have to work at it. Everything was reactive and they got sales in spite of what they were doing, not because of what they were doing. So resumes are very misleading. We would encourage you to kind of look at what are those wishy-washy or kind of fat words that are on the resume that could mean a lot of different things, and dig into those and see what's really missing, not necessarily what's there. Step 3, again, as we discussed earlier, the sales candidates that are interviewing are typically good at first impressions. They tell you what they want to hear or what you want to hear. They're really good at, asking you some questions, and it's just challenging to dig through the smoke screens. And so we would suggest something very different for an interview. And I would just tell you to think about that first interview as not an interview, but an audition. The only way you're going to know if that candidate can sell to your prospects in your world with your stuff is if you force them to do it on the spot. If they say they were making cold calls, let's hear what that cold call sounds like. If they were making them, they should be able to regurgitate it really quick. I want to know what was their day like on December 12th. Pull up your calendar. Let's see what you did that day. How about January 10th? How about February 22nd? So I want to randomly pick some days in the calendar and have them show me what they did those days. I don't want to see any blanks. I want to see a full calendar. I want to see a full schedule. I want to understand what those things were. What were those activities that drove those outcomes, and how did they measure those things? So the interviewing is typically a problem because most hiring managers and most people ask questions that are not pertinent to the position. They're not pertinent to ferret out what is that salesperson going to be doing 90 days after we make them the offer and they've become gainfully employed. So we want to find out all those things beforehand. Of course, in an hour here, we're trying to cram about 8 hours of information into an hour and give you some highlights and overviews. And we can't get into everything here, but certainly if you have some questions or you might be curious about that process, we'd certainly encourage you to click on the free trial resource. So there's a free trial that you can select. I guess that resource there is on the right side of the screen. Click on that. You'll be able to complete one of our candidate assessments, take you through the process and help you understand what are some of the other things you can learn before you interview that individual. Last step and biggest challenge with with the traditional hiring process is really hoping and praying. How do we hope this person makes it? And that's just not good business. Hope's not a strategy. So let's take a look at, the answer. What do we have to do? We got to change the way that we identify, attract, interview, and hire stronger salespeople. So let's go through some of those things. If we look at our 13-step process, first thing we would encourage you to do is identify the flaws, identify your sales DNA. We're going to blow that up and talk about that in depth in a minute. Use the right ads and how to write the ads to attract the right talent, where to source those people, how to use automation to set it all up so you're not spending tons of admin time going through the hiring process. Assessment of the candidates should be automatic as well. What's a phone qualification, the first interview, the final interview, the offer, the first 90 days, which is critically important, and then success conditioning. So let's kind of break that down a little bit. When we start to identify the ideal salesperson, it's really important to understand what are the types of sales this individual is going to be making. Who should they be calling on? What are the price points that they're going to be selling at? What kind of pressure is placed on them from a management standpoint? What are the types of competition that they run into? Are you the only game in town? Do they have to compete at a high level with 3 to 5 vendors? How much resistance do they face? Who are they going to be calling on inside the organization? Is it the end user? Is it the CEO, the C-suite? Is it the business manager? Who's making those decisions to purchase your products and services? And so we would encourage that the first step is to really identify what does your ideal salesperson need to look like? What do they sound like? What do they do? What are the expectations? And so that's important to really just understand what's the first step for that. We certainly have some questionnaires, and we can help you with that. The free trial will certainly give you some ideas about how to go about making that ideal salesperson. From there, we want to kind of compare them to the perfect salesperson in a perfect world that doesn't exist. Here's a quick kind of 3-step definition of the perfect salesperson in a perfect world that doesn't exist. I'm not going to read it to you, but you can get this copy of this PowerPoint and read it a little bit later. But really, when we look at taking the perfect salesperson in the perfect world and then applying your stuff to it, and your stuff is what we would call the base. What are the behaviors? What are the attitudes? What are the skills that are necessary? And what kind of environment is that person going to be selling in? Certainly selling $250,000 enterprise software systems is much different and a much different type of sale than selling internet pay-per-click ads or selling websites or selling roofing. And so your business is your business, and your business is very unique to how you manage it, to how you run it, to how your products and services fit into the marketplace. And so it's important to identify that ideal person, then take the base of the sales quotient, we would call it, or the DNA of the sales superstar, and apply those behaviors that are necessary, attitude, skills, and the environment. So once that's done, then we can start to use that information to attract the right people. In the ad itself, we certainly would want a heading that's catchy, a heading that's not the same as every other heading in the job board. So before you post your ad or write your ad, go to the job boards where you expect to place it. Read some of those headings. They will all say the same. It sounds the same. It's like the same old song and dance. It's just, so you want to stand out. So stand out with something different. Stand out with something that describes the individual that you're looking to capture. Describe something about exciting, but not like the traditional exciting opportunity, unlimited potential. They all sound the same. Then make a list of must-haves. What does the candidate must have in order to be successful in your base? Behaviors, attitudes, skills, and environment. What should they have? Those would be kind of nice twos. What are the income requirements? We certainly are not going to be able to afford a salesperson at $250,000 if our business doesn't warrant that type of salesperson. If we're looking to hire someone at $75,000 to $100,000 and we're attracting people in the 250 range, then that doesn't really fit, and vice versa. So the income requirements need to be part of that ad as well. That's real simple. Just put a statement in your ads: must have earned $80,000 in a variable comp plan. So anybody that reads that ad that hadn't made that much money won't apply. So we're going to get rid of people like that. People that are making $200 won't apply for that position as well. So the income requirement's important to put in the ad as well. And then just leave instructions. Send your resume to this particular email box. I would suggest you have a very specific email box for that position, and that's the position that is for sales at XYZ. And then somebody's going to be monitoring that box. So writing the ad is critically important. If you want some help with that, I'm sure one of us on the call can help you with that. Just send us a note, but we'll be happy to review some of that with you. And then where do you go? When you go to traditional and non-traditional resources to place those ads, sometimes the job boards are effective, sometimes they're not. If you're in a heavily populated marketplace, sometimes you want to place job boards on the outskirts of those areas. Some cases you want to go to the coffee shop and put ads on the board. Sometimes you want to put them in the magazines for the trade journals. So there's a whole list of other resources of where to place those ads, but you want to announce to the world that you are growing and you are looking, and you will start to attract people to you as well. Qualification, another huge component. How do we qualify the candidate? Well, of course, the phone screen is going to be important in that. And then, of course, the candidate assessment would be really important to understand, what is this person doing for me? So what we know through third-party research, third-party studies, PhDs come in and grab several thousand of our clients, several thousand of our candidates that have been placed, and they do studies about every 2 years. And the last study that came out showed that 92% of all candidates that were hired with a recommendation from our assessment are with the company and in the top half of the sales team 12 months later. 75% of all candidates that were hired against the recommendation didn't make it past 6 months. So it's easy when statistics are in your favor. There's a sliding scale on the assessment. When we look at the sales quotient, we can see that the perfect salesperson in the perfect world that we just kind of showed you the slide for earlier scores a 170. So think of an intelligence quotient or an IQ. This is an SQ. What we know from our million-plus salespeople we've analyzed is that the average sales quotient is about 90 to 120. We also know that 78% of people in sales should not be in sales, and those are the ones that are giving us a bad name. Those are ones that are giving the industry a bad name. So when you use a third-party assessment tool, it should give you intelligence that you can't find somewhere else. As we look at the hire, how do we do that? Well, certainly when you've made that decision, you should have the resources available. And so when you make someone an offer, there should be some success conditioning. There should be an onboarding process. And Julie, I know that you guys do a lot of work in that area. Can you kind of speak to that for us?
Well, this is exactly where value selling comes in with our clients, is how to onboard and ramp these people up quickly with proven techniques, and why this has been such a great partnership for value selling, of getting the right people on the bus and then giving them the right skills and tools and processes to shorten that time to productivity and maximize the return on investment for that asset. What I will also tell you is our clients that are looking at this process from hiring through onboarding and partnering with us, that sales quotient that is provided through this assessment process is unbelievably powerful, because not only does it give you insight, it literally comes with an interviewing guide that helps you figure out where you should direct those interview questions to uncover maybe gaps or really get clarification on areas that might put that individual at risk in the categories that Rocky identified, from skills, behaviors, environment, and attitudes. And it also enables them to develop that onboarding plan, partnering with us to get them off the ground quickly. So it's really been extremely successful partnership from that perspective.
Great stuff, Julie. And I would just hitchhike on that a little bit. When a candidate is hired, we reprocess that candidate report and turn it into an onboarding and coaching report. It's got a tremendous amount of more narrative. It's about 40 pages compared to 15 pages. It gives a great basis for the hiring manager and the sales manager to be able to sit down with that new employee and build out a plan. We think it's critically important for that success conditioning and having a 90-day onboarding plan. So if the candidate shows up and they get hired and it's day 42, what are they supposed to accomplish on day 42? By week 7, what should they have accomplished? By week 12, what do they need to know? So many times companies struggle with that because it's such an elephant to try to eat. But a real simple way to think about it is, if you go out to the end of 90 days, what are the things that your new sales employees should be able to do and are doing on a daily basis? And then back up from 90 days to 60 days, and from 60 days to 30 days, and from 30 days to 4 weeks, and then 3 weeks, and 2 weeks, and 1 week. So if you have a really strong onboarding program, your salespeople will be a lot more successful. They need to know how they're measured. You know, one of the things that's happening with the dynamics of sales today is the millennials are in the marketplace now. They're typically hired for this new role of business development or lead qualification or lead generation or inbound marketing where they pre-qualify things. And the millennials are a little different of a beast than what a lot of organizations are used to. They're not necessarily motivated by money. They're more intrinsically motivated. They want a good work environment. They want a good ergonomic environment. They're somewhat conservative about the environment. They're a lot more concerned about those things than they are money. Money is not the driver for these millennials, at least from what we can see from our research. So how do we know that these millennials who don't have a lot of sales experience are going to be able to be effective in a selling role? And the third-party assessments that we produce for organizations really helps identify what is that hidden or invisible weakness that neutralizes the strengths many times. What is their desire? What is their commitment level? How are they motivated? What are the current skill sets? What are their natural capabilities? So a lot of times people say, well, can you use these tools with people who have no experience? And the answer is absolutely, because we're looking for two critical factors. One, what I call the will to sell, which is made up of desire and commitment, but also the DNA components, which are those hidden or invisible weaknesses that neutralize people's strengths. And that's what we really need to uncover and identify. So with new people, the interesting thing is they do have a will to sell. They do have some DNA. Much of it is learned through their environment, through their parents. Maybe they had some influence in restaurants and, they were kind of outgoing. But many of them also don't, and those are the people that are going to really cost you money and cost you a hiring mistake, if you will. So onboarding is critically important to the successful sales hire. I know we've kind of been blowing through a lot of this information. Many of you have busy schedules and you don't have a ton of time to spend with us, so we appreciate the time that you have given us. I think it makes sense maybe just to kind of pause for a minute and see what kind of questions we have from the participants.
Absolutely, Rocky. We've got a number of questions, and a couple of them are kind of procedural from your experience. When do you insert this assessment into the hiring process? Do you do it after a first interview? Do you do it before a resume even makes it or a candidate even makes it to the hiring manager's desk? What is your recommendation from a process perspective?
Great question, and I would try to share with you a couple of different perspectives of that. Most organizations that have used assessments use them at the end of the interview process to justify what they think they've learned about the candidate. And then when the report comes back maybe not so good, they have a tendency to not trust the reports and to make their own decision anyway, which, as we learned earlier through the statistics, 14% accuracy for hiring decisions in sales. So the recommendation would also go along with EEOC guidelines, which tell us that if we're going to use a assessment for a position, we have to use it as soon as they become a candidate. In today's world, they become a candidate as soon as you open the email. So we suggest that clients use these assessment tools on the very front end of their hiring process, and that's part of the automation. Before we can process any assessments, we first have to have what we call a role specification, a questionnaire to identify the ideal salesperson. Our system creates a link. That link is sent to all candidates. All candidates take the assessment right at the beginning stages. We can automate that email response. So if you have an email box that says sales@XYZ, everybody sends their resume there. You put an auto response message on that email box. It says something to the tune of, thank you for your interest in our organization and our position. We take onboarding new employees very seriously. We want to make sure it's not only a good fit for us, but also a good fit for you. In order to get to know you better, we'd like you to complete an online questionnaire. Here's the link. As soon as you've completed this step, someone from our company will be in touch with you. And that automates the process. We also don't charge the assessments by the assessment. You don't pay per assessment. We charge based on the number of hires you would expect to make in the next 12 months. So we have unlimited candidate assessments. You could literally run 5,000 assessments if you wanted to hire 2 people. Not likely, but certainly possible. So there's no limit on the number of assessments, and we would encourage everyone to put this assessment on the very front end of it for a couple of reasons. One, EEOC. 2, the statistics tell us that 92% of all the people that are recommended are with the company 12 months later. 75% of the candidates that are hired against the recommendation don't make it past 6 months. So why would you want to spend time with a candidate going through the interview process, 2-3 hours, several other resources, couple of weeks' time, and then run an assessment and find out they're not the right person? So we would highly recommend you put it on the front end.
Thank you, Rocky. That's really interesting. You know, in our instance, what's been really interesting to me is putting it at the front end of the process. We've had 10% of the candidates that would have likely taken up someone's time to have an initial phone screening not even bother to complete the online assessment, which to me has been a really interesting fact. Now, maybe they'll do it later. Maybe they decided not to do it now. But who knows if the position will be available later. So it's really interesting just to see who jumps on it and who doesn't as an indicator for a sense of urgency, desire, will to really be considered for that position. Another question. Whoops.
Go ahead.
Go.
I was just going to hitchhike a little bit on yours, but
okay.
Let's take another question.
Another question is, when you look at hiring salespeople, and you talked about the DNA of, you know, every job is different and every role, even within a company, is different. What do you see as some of the common skills or attitudes that are kind of the admission ticket or the price of admission that hiring managers should be looking for potential sales reps, especially those younger people coming out of college who might not have direct sales experience to draw from?
I think the DNA factors that we measure, such as need for approval, emotional involvement, supportive beliefs, the ability to discuss money and their money ceiling, and being able to deal with rejection, which is huge for millennials because they grew up in the trophy generation, so to say, and we, myself included, coddled them in some way, and I respect them, and I think they're a great part of the population. Don't take it as a negative, but there are a lot of reasons behind that. You know, they took what we gave them and they made the best of it. So, you know, everybody can talk bad about millennials, but we really are responsible, the baby boomers and the next geners, for creating what they are. They didn't have to face a lot of disappointment. They didn't have to face a lot of negativity. We protected them from that. So to get them in the sales role, being able to deal with rejection is an important finding. Need for approval, typically salespeople with high need for approval have a tendency to accept think-it-overs. They don't ask tough questions when they should. They have trouble confronting the prospect when it's time to confront the prospect. Based on those things, they have a bloated pipeline with stuff that's hope instead of real. And they have longer sales cycles. So need for approval can be a very tough thing to overcome because it's given to us by our parents and our guardians, and we grow up with it as part of our psyche. It's okay to have need for approval from your family members, from your church groups, from your community, from your coworkers. It's not okay in sales to have need for approval from your prospect. What we have to help those weakness or people with that weakness do is be able to change the need for approval to a need for respect and reframe that for them and give them the tools to be able to distance themselves from that approval when they're in front of a prospect. Buy cycle is something a lot of people never heard of. But what we discovered years ago is the way you buy things is a mirror image of the way you expect people to buy from you. So if we have a salesperson who shops a lot for a major purchase, they go to 5 or 6 different places, maybe 10. They do internet research. They go to the same place 4 or 5 times before they make the decision to buy it. They buy based on price. Those types of salespeople who do that with that negative, non-supportive buy cycle will be very vulnerable to the prospect who wants to think it over, to the prospect who wants to take some time and talk to some other people about it, to the prospect that's going to make this salesperson compete, to the prospect that is going to buy on price, because that's what they do. So they're vulnerable to it. Another factor we kind of brought up is emotional involvement. When people get emotionally involved, they have a tendency to talk to themselves. And while they're talking to themselves, they're listening to themselves. And so they can't be listening to the prospect. And therefore, by having poor listening skills, that creates poor questioning skills. So those factors will certainly be important to sales managers looking for, what are the key factors that I need to be aware of for the salespeople I'm going to be hiring? Because those are what those hidden or invisible weaknesses, again, neutralize the strengths. So it's important to kind of bring those things up in the interview process and be able to see how does the salesperson perform, and are those things present in a negative way or a positive way, and will that be appropriate for the prospects that they're selling to?
It's so fascinating, Rocky, and thank you so much for your insight. One thing I learned a long time ago as a hiring sales manager is that I always ended up hiring for the right skills. And when someone didn't work out and I had to let them go, it was rarely because of the skills and more often because of the attitude. And those attitudinal factors are so difficult to uncover on a resume. And even in checking references today, with the litigious aspect of that in the U.S., it's very difficult to really get good, candid feedback from prior people. And no one's going to give you a reference for somebody who they've had a relationship go sideways or not work out. So it's so fascinating. So, Rocky, as we wrap up here, I just can't thank you enough for joining us. Let me share some upcoming information with you as well, everybody who's joining us. First, please mark your calendars. Our next webinar will be on May 16th. We're going to be talking to sales reps about boosting our business acumen in order to build our credibility. Really, in today's world, to sell to executives, we have to become a business executive ourselves. So the topic we're going to be addressing in May is going to be around how do we do that if we're not a CFO by trade or haven't had significant business management experience. Last but not least, please join the conversation and share your feedback on today's session and any other feedback from Value Selling, and join us. And last but not least, if you would like further information, both Rocky and I are available to help you answer any specific questions, either about hiring superstars or onboarding superstars once you've hired them. And we look forward to hearing your comments about today. So, Rocky, thank you very much for your
Julie,
expertise.
thank you. I hope it's been helpful for everyone.
Absolutely. And for those of you that joined us today, thank you for taking time out of your day. Happy Thursday. Good luck and good selling. Take care.